Okay.
And I know your growers have probably seen it a dozen times, but feel free to link them to that. So I'm recording now. I'm just going to make the first announcement that if you would like Oregon Department of Agriculture pesticide credits, to please type your name as it appears on your pesticide license and your pesticide license number into the chat box. You'll have to tell me, Mark, how you've been doing pesticide credits there, if you've been doing them on webinars or what you've been doing.
No, they've been pretty strict about it, unfortunately, through Virginia Department of Ag and Consumer Services. So we have to like have official training set up in Canvas as courses through Virginia Tech, really, to offer them online. It's been kind of difficult.
So
that's really nice. You guys have that liberty. That's great.
Yeah, I just have to, double check, make sure everybody was signed in, and then we're able to do it that way. We tend to get a lot of flack because our ODA makes you fill out a lot of forms to get a pesticide credit. So you have to fill out a lot of forms, but they've been really nice about letting people get credits this way. Three more minutes. And Mark, are you in your office? Are you guys kind of back to work, back in your offices there?
It's still kind of mixed depending on what folks are doing. We're typically required to be in at least two days a week. I had come back to 5 days a week, and then when numbers spiked again, was teleworking a little bit still, or back to teleworking some now, but I have better connectivity here at the office and don't have kids running around to distract. So I prefer to work from the office, honestly.
Your daughters they're getting old. They're what, 12?
Oh yeah, my oldest is turned 16 next week, so
now I feel old.
yeah, she's got her learner's permit and all that.
I was wondering if she still really liked to wear camouflage and was sneaking.
That's Hannah, yes. She does. Camouflage or athletic gear, that's what she's wearing.
They're so funny. They are so funny. All right, everybody, I'm going to give it one more minute in case people are having trouble signing on to Zoom as usual. Some of you have already heard. Please enter your full name and your pesticide license number, your name as it appears on your pesticide license, into the chat box so you can get 1 ODA credit for this presentation. I can't believe they're 16. I remember, Mark, when they were saying their dad was making them do that little race.
The apple run, yeah.
Apple run.
Yeah, and Jacob he'll be 5 in a month.
And I remember when we had like that little baby shower for you. Yeah. That's crazy.
Time flies.
It's hard to believe I've been gone from there that long. All right, everybody, it is 10:02. We're going to get started here. And today we have Mark Sutphin from Virginia Cooperative Extension. And Mark was a colleague of mine when I was a graduate student at Virginia Tech. And today Mark's going to be talking about the spotted lanternfly, an emerging invasive pest in the US. So spotted lanternfly has been around since about 2015 in Pennsylvania, but it was spotted in 2018 in Virginia. And Mark has been teaching orchardists, fieldmen, and homeowners how to spot the spotted lanternfly on their properties. So I'm really excited to have him here today because we've had a report of 2 dead spotted lanternflies in the container industry in the Willamette Valley. And these little guys like to move around on metal, which makes me really nervous since we have a big railroad industry here, especially in the Dalles. And I'm excited to hear what Mark has to say about how we should be scouting for these things. So just a little reminder about using Zoom. So I have everybody muted and I can't see you. If you have some sort of technical issue that I might be able to help with, you can raise your hand and I will try to the best of my ability to help you. I would like you to use the Q&A box today for all questions. So if you have a question for Mark, please use the Q&A box. If you type it into the chat, it may get missed because that is where I'm having you type your full name and your pesticide license number to get credits. So please type all questions into the Q&A. I don't want to miss one. And with that, I will hand it over to Mark Sutphin from Virginia Cooperative Extension.
Thanks so much, Ashley. It's great to be with you all. I'm going to share my screen. Is that the right view? I think I'm good. There we go.
Yep, that looks great, Mark.
All right. And as Ashley said, I'm Mark Sutphin with Virginia Cooperative Extension. I serve a 5-county region in the northern part of Virginia in the northern Shenandoah Valley. I'm located and my office is housed in Winchester, Virginia, the city of Winchester, and the county of Frederick. So that's a little bit about where I'm located. I've been with Virginia Cooperative Extension just over 9 years now, and work in an area where it's our largest fruit growing region in the state, primarily apple production. And historically, we have largely been processing apples here in this part of the state, although I think many of you realize that that's a waning industry. Ashley, feel free to interrupt me with questions as we go along. If that seems appropriate, I'm happy to entertain questions as we go along. So happy to be with you guys today and talk about this pest, spotted lanternfly. As Ashley said, it's one we've been dealing with here in Winchester, Frederick County, Virginia, for the last 3 years and has occupied a large part of my time and portion of my workload just to educate both growers and the general public and general business commerce, because this impacts everyone. Trying to get this to advance. I think there we go. Wanted to give credit to Eric Day and Teresa Dellinger. Both are in our Insect ID lab on main campus at Virginia Tech for their efforts in helping put a lot of this slide together. Just a bit of an overview on spotted lanternfly. As Ashley said, Pennsylvania has been dealing with this pest since 2014. It arrived in Berks County in southeast PA in 2014. And as you can see by the counties shaded in blue, that's where there is active population that is actually breeding. Those outlined in red, red outline is where there is an internal state quarantine. So those exist in Pennsylvania, adjoining New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and our small population here in the northern part of Virginia as well. We have seen this population spread even beyond what's shown here on this map. I anticipate it being updated in the coming weeks and months with some additional counties to the south of Frederick County, and also I think our Virginia Department of Ag and Consumer Services is is certainly considering a possible expansion of the quarantine. So that may be coming, yet to be determined. A little specific about our situation in Virginia, found in January of 2018 in Winchester, or just outside of Winchester, the center part of Frederick County. And the population was found at a brick and stone yard that had a trace forward dating back to 2015 from the original population detection area in Pennsylvania. So it likely is the population was here since 2015, or first started in 2015, but took that amount of time for it to build up and be detected, even though scouting and efforts by Virginia Department of Ag and Consumer Services were happening in the area all the way back to 2015. It took them nearly 2 years to really be detected. The population was determined to be about a 1 square mile area in spring of 2018, and unfortunately, that has considerably expanded. The yellow square on this map is in the approximate location of that original 1 square mile detection area. As you can see, it's well spread now throughout the eastern part of Frederick County and into the adjoining counties as well, with positive finds. And I would point out, and Ashley and I were talking a little bit in pre-discussion, that that line that kind of exists on the eastern side there, which is Clark County and Warren County, a lot of that is along a rail line. And I know that Pennsylvania has seen similar situations as well. The find to the south of us in Shenandoah County, that lone find in the lower left corner of the map, is along Interstate 81, associated with truck traffic. So transportation of this insect and movement of this insect, the human assisted movement of this insect, is very real and really the greatest threat. It is believed to have arrived to the US on ornamental landscaping stone from China. The pest is native to Asia, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam region. It has spread in Asia to uh, South Korea and Japan. And as I said, then to North America in 2014, it showed up in Pennsylvania. This is a photograph of the insect in the adult life form with an egg mass there on the tree. The spotted lanternfly, oftentimes you will see, like in the photo behind me with the wings wide open and spread open, that's how it's often portrayed online and in printed media. Rarely you will see it like that, though. That's a pose they may present when startled or alarmed as adults, or as they're in flight. You can see that bright red coloring and their wings, but typically their wings are folded over their back, and you see them as is presented here in this photograph. We're currently, the winter months, the overwintering stage is the egg mass. So that smear that looks almost like putty, or a wax or mud smear on the tree, is a coated egg mass, and that's the stage we're currently in. A little bit about the life cycle, and despite the name being lanternfly, it is not a fly, it is not a butterfly, it is not a moth, it is a plant hopper. Fagoridae is the family it belongs to, and it completes one life cycle per year. As I said, the egg mass is what we currently are in for overwintering. We will see those hatch and then go through 4 nymphal or juvenile stages throughout the spring and summer. They will hatch in late April, early May, here in the Mid-Atlantic and East Coast region where they're currently existing, and then reach adulthood sometime in July. usually mid-July, and begin laying eggs mid-September and continue that until cold temps kill them off, kill the adults off, and that can last into November or even early December here, again in the Mid-Atlantic region. This is the juvenile stage, or really the first 3 juvenile stages look like this. They do not fly, but they can jump quite well. They are fairly small. The nymphal stage 1 is just a few millimeters in length. They pose themselves much like a frog. It's kind of what it reminds me of. They have these large head projections that stick out of the front of their head, and you can see that noted with the red arrow. But the first 3 nymphal stages are this black coloration with bright white spots, and they will often hide under leaf material, the underside of leaves, and they're typically feeding on tender new growth of plants, a wide range of plants at this life stage, or these life stages, and can jump really well. I've seen them jump 6 to 8 feet from a complete standstill as you walk by and brush them along. Here they are, and this shows you kind of what they will do to that tender young growth. The photo to the left is a wild grapevine. That is a host that they like quite well. Our vineyard industries are certainly concerned about spotted lanternfly, and that is the ag crop that is greatest at risk with these pests. To the right is tree of heaven, Ailanthus altissima. That is their favorite host and primary host. That too is an invasive species, a weed species from Asia that is tightly associated with spotted lanternfly. The 4th juvenile stage is this stage that's shown in front of you now. This is when they pick up the bright red coloration in the nymphal stage. They still cannot fly, but are great hoppers and jump really well at this stage. It is in this stage that we find them often moving to black walnut, juglans, nigra is the genus and species. I don't know that you guys have tons of black walnut out there on the West Coast, but other juglans species may exist and prove to be suitable hosts for this insect. But we see them congregating quite a bit to the native black walnut at this life stage. Just another photo of a 4th instar poised on a grape leaf. And again, showing aggregation and feeding characteristics, and they are phloem feeders. They are drinking the sap out of the host plant that they're feeding on. They do not actually typically feed directly on the fruit or nuts of the host plant, like brown marmorated stink bug or other species. They are tapping into the phloem of the host plant and feeding. On the photo at left, that's again tree of heaven, Ailanthus altissima, and you can see a few black and white nymphs, so that's probably 3rd, maybe 2nd and 3rds, as well as a lot of the red nymphs, which is the 4th juvenile stage. The photo to the right is one molting out of its exoskeleton from 3rd to 4th instar, and they often look like this, kind of like little shrimp or something like that, until they dry and their color really solidifies. A few more photos just to show you the different stages, life cycle stages. On the left, we've got a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 4th instar. To the right, you've got a 3rd, 4th, and then an adult. both of those were on Tree of Heaven. Here we are again on black walnut. As I said, the fourth instar really likes that black walnut species, and the photo's not the clearest, but you can see quite a few of them congregating on that limb along it, and it was like that all the way back to the trunk, so much so, and feeding to the point that you can start to see some decline on the leaves, and one dead leaf there on that branch. Here are the adults. Again, I spoke of how they typically are not seen with their wings open unless they are frightened or unless they are flying. They typically have them folded over their back. You see the spotted and the spotted pattern on their wings with the tips having black bars. That is the typical pose that you will see. They're quite large, and again, being phloem feeders, sap suckers, uh, they are much like aphids. I will often equate them to aphids the size of your thumb, and they will congregate and feed in large numbers, produce lots of honeydew, as you'll see in some additional slides here, and that becomes part of the nuisance factor of this pest as well. Here they are again aggregating in high numbers. All of these, I believe, are photos up in Pennsylvania. The one to the left is an ornamental cherry tree in the residential yard up in Pennsylvania. To the right, they are feeding on wine grape vine, and bottom right is Tree of Heaven again. And you can see the mass numbers that can occur and will feed on a single host at one time, literally by the thousands. They can feed at one time. Talking about the honeydew, this video will hopefully play, and I'll play it a couple times, but this is the backyard of a residence here in Winchester, Virginia. The trees there with some English ivy to the right growing up them by the birdhouse, and the trees adjacent, those are Tree of Heaven. They are heavily infested with spotted lanternfly, and it is playing now. If you look against the board fence in the back, you can see droplets raining down out of the canopy of this tree. Oops, sorry about that. I wanted to play it again, if it will let me. It's not letting me play it again. Oh well, we'll just keep going. But there were at least 10 droplets raining down at the same time in this video. So you can imagine, as that's constantly happening, you get the buildup of honeydew, and that leads to sooty mold. There we go. It's playing again.
And Mark, I can't remember, do they do that when they're disturbed or do they just do that whenever?
That's a constant result of their feeding. So they
Okay.
they are just feeding quite excessively and have to process through high volumes of sap or phloem fluid out of the host plant, and just creates a large amount of waste. So when it's drier conditions, here in the east we have considerable rain all throughout the year, considerable precipitation all throughout the year, and it can wash this off of the leaves. But when we have dry spells, you get buildup of that honeydew, which starts to grow a fungus, sooty mold on it. That sooty mold in and of itself does not damage the plant, but as it turns the leaf surface black, it can reduce photosynthesis. So for host plants and in the grape, in the wine grape industry, we see buildup of that sooty mold, and you have kind of a double effect happening. You have the feeding damage of the lanternfly pulling resources from the plant, and then also the reduced photosynthesis that's happening because of buildup of the sooty mold. You can also get yeast patches that grow on fermenting sap and honeydew that are oozing, that starts oozing out of the tree trunk, and you see that there on the tree to the right. All of these photos show tree of heaven, again the primary host of spotted lanternfly. Both of these photos are depicting tree of heaven as well. Um, the point of both of these is to allude to the fact that also with that sticky sugary honeydew waste that they're producing, it starts to attract different bees and hornets and wasps and ants and things of that nature. So again, in the residential populated areas where this insect can occur, that adds another component that can create a problem. The photo to the left, even though it's a poor quality, that was a homeowner's yard here in Winchester. She had reached out to some local beekeepers thinking she had a honeybee swarm in her trees because there were literally hundreds of honeybees swarming this tree. Uh, just down low at the trunk, I've circled a few of those in red. There were actually honeybees and bumblebees and yellow jackets, numerous species of bees and wasps that were coming to these trees. The beekeeper had reached out to me. You can also see in this photo large yeast patches that are growing down at the base just on all that fermenting honeydew and sap. You get a pretty strong vinegar smell in areas like this as well. The egg masses, as you can see here, we've consistently seen those first laid in middle of September here in the Winchester, Virginia area, about the same time frame up in Pennsylvania, even though they're a little bit north of us. And the egg mass is probably the most difficult stage to recognize and truly identify, and yet it is probably the stage that is most concern, because movement of an egg mass can start a new population, as we saw with the original population being started in Pennsylvania, and then a smaller population started here in Virginia. It's just one movement of an egg mass can start that. And I often give talks here in Virginia, and folks in the farther corners in the southern region of Virginia say, well, we're pretty far away from you in the northernmost part of the state. I'm not that concerned about it. And I say, just remember, Pennsylvania was one shipment away from China. So really, the potential for this to show up is real anywhere in the U.S. A few photos, varying stages of eggs here, showing old egg masses there on the left. These are courtesy of Heather Leach at Penn State University with Pennsylvania Extension. The ones on the left are emerged. You can see the slits where the nymphs have already hatched out. There is a newer egg mass up in the higher regions of that photograph. Then in the center, we've got an egg mass on a metal T-post, and to the right is a brand new egg mass on a grapevine. You can see some of the eggs themselves here on the top that did not get covered with the coating. That covering that the female lays on the egg mass starts out bright white, as you see there in the photo on the far right. As it dries in 24 hours or so, it will change to an off-white or tan, sometimes gray or even brown coloration. There can be some variability with the egg masses and what they look like. So I've got quite a few photos here. Again, that would be the stage that you would see as a viable stage right now if it was showing up in shipping goods or movement of something from the populated areas here on the East Coast. They can lay the eggs really on anything. We see them on plant material, on posts, on trunks of trees. Oftentimes on the underside of tree branches is where they seem to prefer to lay, but a lot of non-plant plant hosts can have eggs deposited like these cushions. Here is concrete as well as rusty metal on an abandoned tractor trailer is just coated there in the bottom right hand corner with a bunch of egg masses. Another old egg mass on a branch top right photo. Some more egg masses again just to show what it looks like, and the variability that you can see in these egg masses. The photo to the left shows them on a cut surface of an old cherry tree. The newer egg masses are shiny. As they dry, they become more dull and darker in coloration typically. And you can see off-white to tan to a gray coloration there. There is one old egg mass on the left side here of that cut branch that had emerged the previous year. The red arrows are noting egg masses on the underside of branches. This was a wild cherry tree that we were seeing lots of egg masses on a few years ago. And again, the typical location is the underside of horizontal branches is where we see the majority of the egg masses deposited. Observationally, it seems like a lot are way up in the canopy of the tree, and data is emerging to confirm that it seems the majority are well above human height up in the canopy of the trees, especially tree of heaven and trees associated with tree of heaven, but they can really lay them anywhere. Again, some more egg masses to show what they look like as they dry and crack, and that coating starts to flake off as the winter progresses. The egg masses themselves are about 1.5 inches in length, maybe 1 inch wide. That can vary. They could be a 1/2 inch in width by 1 inch, or maybe even 2 inches long, and oftentimes have 20 to 30, maybe a few more eggs per egg mass. Some of the non-plant egg sites that we've seen here in Virginia are listed here, but really any site is possible that sits still during the egg laying months of September to November. Another age progression photo from Pennsylvania to show you what the egg mass looks like as it ages throughout the winter months. And the host list is quite extensive. Worldwide, it's known to be over 100 species now. Here in Virginia, this is what we've documented on, and I'm not going to go through this extensively, but for us, it involves landscape species. It involves a lot of invasive species. It involves ag crops and others. So this pest is a pest to agriculture. Primary concern again is grapes for cultivated ag crops. Peaches and cherries and some other stone fruits are of concern as well. We've seen this as a forest pest and concern in the timber industry because it likes things like black walnut and some of the maples that are used for forest products. It is a pest in the home landscape, as I've mentioned already, and it is a general nuisance pest to commerce and general business because of the quarantines that are imposed and the additional factors of having to inspect loads and vehicles and things of that nature to help ensure we're not moving this pest around. Our team at Virginia Cooperative Extension and Penn State has just been fantastic. Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture too, in sharing resources and helping us as we've developed things. We have a host of resources here, and additionally, in the center is an online reporting portal that we use and ask for the general public, as well as our growers to scout and report to us where and when they find them. Best management practices are shared with local businesses. Again, there is a permitting process to go through so that all businesses are required by the state quarantine in Frederick County and the city of Winchester to self-inspect their loads and materials before they leave the perimeter of the county. Wanted to just mention too that all throughout the state for the last 3 years, we've been conducting volunteer banding and citizen science monitoring throughout the state. This was developed after a program that has been successful in Pennsylvania using sticky bands, although we are now transitioning to some other trapping types to reduce the bycatch. But that roll there to the left is a sticky band, a paper with one-sided sticky material on it, and it is good to wrap around tree trunks. Primarily, we will put those around Tree of Heaven, and those nymphs that do not fly, that are still jumping and crawling around, will often jump out of tree canopies or fall out of tree canopies and then climb back up the tree trunk. So you can use this sticky paper to monitor fairly low populations of this insect and determine if they're there. Other researchers are using eDNA to try to detect low populations of this pest, but in a lot of grower situations and even residential and industrial areas where we don't have those capabilities, this banding has proved to be pretty successful method to understand if there is population in the area. But they will typically get stuck to the sticky paper at the bottom of the tree, at the bottom of the band as they're climbing back up. We're moving more to these circle traps or modified circle traps that are being tested out and implemented by the USDA Appalachian Fruit Research Station here in nearby Kearneysville, West Virginia. Dr. Tracy Lesky and her team, I'll show a photo of the modified circle trap. This is the traditional circle trap, often used to trap pecan weevils and some other things, but it will successfully trap spotted lanternfly as it climbs back up the trunk of the tree. But this reduces bycatch. On those sticky bands, we often get lots of other insects stuck to that, sometimes small mammals and reptiles and birds and things of that nature. And so when using that with volunteers or the general public, that's not found too favorably when they bring in some of that bycatch. And then our volunteers are reporting into a portal, and thankfully all the blacks are negatives throughout the state of Virginia, and largely our known population is centered up here in Winchester, Frederick County. Some of the research that's happening in the area, and I'll allude to some of what Pennsylvania is doing too, but a lot of this is being done by, again, the USDA, Dr. Tracy Lesky's lab out of Kearneysville, West Virginia. She's replicating trials here in Winchester, Virginia, as well as up in various portions of Pennsylvania, looking at efficacy trials in those caged containers, the modified circle trap with a larger container there. They've been looking at different lures and attractants to try to figure something out, and nothing really successful to date has been discovered for that. Another photo with the blue tarp on the ground is a efficacy trial really for the landscape and ornamental products that may be used in the residential scenario, looking at host plants, as well as sooty mold production by Jennifer Chandler out of Westchester University there on the photo at the right. And Pennsylvania has really been the Penn State University, the ones leading the efforts with efficacy, and lots of information that they have is kind of what we're going by. And I just wanted to show a few photos and slides of tree of heaven. Again, that is an invasive weed species that grows into a very large tree if allowed. And that is the primary host of spotted lanternfly. And we have it all throughout the East Coast here. And I know you guys have some of it out there as well. And uh, as you prepare before spotted lanternfly arrives to Oregon, removal of tree of heaven would be suggested, or potentially just leaving one or a few trap trees that you can then treat once spotted lanternfly does arrive and exist in your area. If you have larger amounts of property and too much of tree of heaven to remove, I'd certainly recommend looking at the higher risk areas of equipment sheds and buildings and structures where they may exist around those, or other pathways of movement and of transportation, whether that's with your equipment or farm vehicles coming and going, um, and anything close to roadways or pathways and driveways across the property. Um, Tree of heaven does exist as separate male and female trees. So removing the female trees first would be a priority so that they are no longer producing and dispersing seeds. And tree of heaven is one that we would not recommend removing without herbicide, because if they're cut down or mowed off, they are known to sprout prolifically from the cut stump or the root system itself as a whole. So typically herbicide application with removal is needed, whether you're using a cut stump uh, paint on herbicide of some sort, or you can do a basal bark application where you spray herbicide to the trunk of a living tree and let it die and then remove it. But killing the entire root system is really needed. Otherwise, you just turn one tree into 100 or so. Some more photos showing that pinnately compound leaf. And there on the left, you can see the seed production, bottom right, and newly emerging foliage almost has a reddish or a bronze coloration to it as it emerges. Again, some more up close photos of the pinnately compound leaf. So it has all these leaflets. One noting factor of identification for tree of heaven, it does have that terminal leaflet at the end, right up here. Some of our other pinnately compound species here on the East Coast do not have that. That terminal leaflet is not there. The other kind of identifying characteristic are these small little lobes at the base of the leaflet that have glands on the underside, and those will often be as a pair shown here, or sometimes you'll have two or maybe even three pairs of those little lobes and glands. And for those of you familiar with tree of heaven, Ailanthus altissima, it has quite a distinctive and nasty smell to it when it's crushed or cut, and can be an identifying characteristic as well. A lot of folks will describe it as rancid peanut butter. Can't say I really know what that smells like, but again, it's a unique smell and quite characteristic of the tree. Some photo showing the bark, younger branch there to the left with um, when it's really young, you can see bright white, large bud scars. Here they are healing over, one here and one down here with lots of lenticels showing on that younger stem. To the right is a larger trunk of Tree of Heaven. As it ages, it almost gets kind of a reptilian or alligator looking bark to it and remains rather smooth, which seems to be a preferable characteristic for lanternflies to be able to feed through and lay egg masses on smoother surfaces. Some photos of them in bloom and then producing seeds in their samaras shown here, and the distribution map shown here in the green coloration. That's the USDA map showing where Tree of Heaven exists all throughout well, not North America, the United States. And then the map to the right is the potential SLF map, spotted lanternfly, where it's believed to potentially be able to exist. And you can see our region here in the mid-Atlantic in bright red as high suitability, unfortunately, and it's thriving and doing quite well here. Final couple slides that I've got for you guys, looking at some possible biocontrol. Since this insect occurs across so many host species and really moves from different species throughout its life cycle, it becomes quite difficult to manage. And we're looking at really needing probably a biocontrol to be able to keep this pest in check and to really be able to manage it. There are no known species of biocontrol insect species that will specialize on spotted lanternfly here in North America. There are some generalist pests or predators like praying mantis and even some wasps and ant species will feed on them. Spiders, wheel bugs, things of that sort will feed on them. But again, when they're occurring literally by the thousands in a single tree, you're not going to have enough predation to impact the population. So biocontrol, looking to some parasitoid wasps that feed on spotted lanternfly in Asia, such as this one shown here. It will lay its egg and develop in the egg of the spotted lanternfly and emerge as an adult from that egg. So you can see there with the black arrow, that is an adult anastasis wasp right there. So you can see how very small they are. There's also another species that will parasitize the developing nymph of spotted lanternfly, and both of those are being studied and researched in USDA quarantine labs. But unfortunately, that process takes quite a few years, nearly a decade, to study and be able to rear and release if that is given the green light. Also, looking at some entomopathogenic fungi, Bavaria species, that's a naturally occurring fungal species that is showing as a possibility to help control spotted lanternfly, and that is available commercially to be able to spray. So those are being studied in efficacy trials and things as well. Certainly environmental factors play a huge role, and the timing of those sprays to make them effective. So that's what I've got, Ashley. Again, another photo of the same poster behind me. We are certainly encouraging folks to kill and report these insects as they find them. Certainly watching the perimeter of our spread, and really for you guys that don't yet have this as an invasive species, thanks for tuning in. Your The goal would be to understand this insect, to be able to identify it, and be looking for it on your property, looking for the egg masses in materials received this time of year, especially if it's coming from the East Coast. Just be aware of what the egg masses look like, and then throughout the growing season, understand the life cycle stages and be able to identify the insect, looking primarily at tree of heaven, and where you may have that on your property would be my suggestion. So with that, let's open it up for any questions, Ashley.
Do you please, if you have some questions for Mark, please type them into the box. We have one. What losses have occurred in commercial ag production, and how is the spotted lanternfly being managed within those systems?
Those are great questions. And Ashley and I were talking about that a little bit before we officially went live. But so here in Virginia, we have yet to see spotted lanternfly impact commercial ag production. Because of our limited population and just the location of where it's occurring has almost all been in residential and industrial areas. We're just now starting to pick it up on the forested edges and tree kind of fence rows in some of the apple orchards. We've not yet seen it in a vineyard setting, so we have not had to control it here in Virginia in the ag setting. In Pennsylvania, they too have still been spared for their major apple growing region, but for grape growing, they have seen it devastate some of their commercial vineyards. They show photos, and I've been to some of their vineyards that are infested, and they will feed on grapevines from instar 1, the first juvenile nymph, all the way through to adult, and cause considerable loss to grapes that are uncontrolled. They've even resulted in complete death of vines. That may not be 100% solely due to lanternfly feeding. I think some of that may be coupled with the stress of the feeding. Also, creating the vine's inability to harden off and survive winter well. Also coupled possibly with wet feet from a wet growing season and a wet fall, as the vines went into the wintertime. But we have, there has been documented damage for sure in wine grape production because of spotted lanternfly. So yeah, a lot still unknown and a lot of research still happening with this insect.
And the East Coast, they really don't have the number of cherry trees, even in New York, that we have here. And I don't know if Chris Adams has any reports of this in Michigan, where they do have more cherries, but it's kind of an unknown on cherries and unknown on pears, although it will likely be more like apples for pears, where you're not getting that major infestation. But if we over apply nitrogen here on our pear trees, like we tend to, we have a lot of that succulent growth that these insects might really enjoy. So that's something else to keep in mind when I repeatedly tell you to slow down on nitrogen application in your older pear trees. So
Yeah, so as the insect spreads into Adams County, Pennsylvania, there are some more cherries there, so we may see really what the impact will be at that point.
yeah, I think that will be very telling, especially for us here where we've only had 2 reports of dead insects. So one of our friends at Soil Water Conservation District is wondering if we should be looking for this already in this region and if we should start an educational campaign now before it's really here. What do you think, Mark?
I would definitely say yes. Raising awareness about this insect is a good thing. And as I said in the presentation, um, we really have no idea where this will show up next, whether that's from movement of it here in North America or additional introductions uh, from Asia. Certainly the egg masses on ornamental landscaping stone were not really a known or considered pathway of movement. And so USDA APHIS has changed some of their measures and, are certainly looking more for this pest. But the movement of this insect is very real, and it could really show up anywhere. Um, I suspect here on the East Coast that we have other small populations of this insect that are yet to be detected, just from movement happening here on the East Coast. So that may be the case out there as well. And as Ashley has alluded, some dead insects have been found in your region, and unfortunately, it's just a matter of time before this is much more widespread.
And Stacy Cooper just wants to point out that this would be a really good time to start tackling to help control Tree of Heaven, and maybe our local growers association would be interested in doing that. The other thing to keep in mind with Tree of Heaven is that that tends to be a preferred host of brown marmorated stink bug as well, and we don't tend to have Tree of Heaven so much in our pear growing regions, but it is a major pest plant, and it's always nice to get rid of Tree of Heaven.
Agreed.
And another just thought is if you have a lot of, stuff out in your orchard, try and keep it cleaned up. That's something I've seen a lot with our leaf hopper issues with X disease, is try and keep your stuff relatively tidy so this doesn't lay eggs on it, and also so you don't have leaf hoppers living around the base of that stuff. So if you have an X disease problem that you need to control and you're on the lookout for this, cleaning out stuff might be a good idea. Does anybody else have any questions for Mark today? I know this hasn't become a big problem here yet, but it really has the potential to become an issue, and we need to keep an eye out for it. Chris Adams, sounds like we need a citizen science campaign to identify it in the suburban areas along the train tracks, likely to find it outside the orchards or vineyards first. And that's definitely the case.
And that's what we've seen here too. That's correct.
Advice on managing citizen science, Mark. This is much more for you than for me.
I'm happy, if somebody wants to reach out, there's my email address on the slide. Feel free to send me a note, and I'm happy to share details on what we've done. Again, a lot of that has been similar to what Pennsylvania has done as well. Because of COVID and things, limitations there, we had to retool a little bit of what we did, but we still had quite a few volunteers all throughout the state monitoring and deploying traps just to look for this insect. Again, any awareness you can raise just about the insect, the more eyes on the ground to see it early on will help you before a population gets well established and spreads.
Thank you so much, Mark. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. I see we have a few folks that are still participating that I know have gotten pesticide credits in the past. If you want pesticide credits, I need you to type your name as it appears on your pesticide license and your pesticide license number into the chat box. And that's really so I have a document that you were actually here in case I am audited by ODA. But yes, thank you so much, Mark. This has been really telling, and I'm really hoping we keep an eye out for it. Do you have any advice on like things you wish you had done earlier before before it kind of became a resident population in Winchester?
Oh, that's a great question. I wish we had found the population sooner. As I alluded, Virginia Department of Ag was investigating the location where it was found, honestly, for 3 years because of a trace forward from Pennsylvania. So it's quite likely that the population did exist from 2015 to 2018 before it was actually discovered. And so if it had been picked up earlier, perhaps eradication of that small population could have happened. Even if that had happened, the reintroduction from additional movement from Pennsylvania is very real, and we may be still seeing that today, even as well as potential movement from our own Virginia population. Who knows? It's pretty difficult to tell exactly where insects are coming from. Um, but yeah, scouting and looking early, uh, like like the comment was made, along those high transit areas, rail and truck traffic is where we're seeing movement right now.
So be especially on the lookout if you have an orchard or if you're managing orchard sites close to the railroad, close to the interstate. Yeah, be on the lookout.
Scouting those high risk sites, where goods are being stored and moved around, where train cars sit for long periods of time on spurs or at different depots, maybe higher risk sites too.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions for you, Mark. I'm so glad you were able to join us and talk about this today. And if anybody has any questions about this, please reach out to me. Chris Adams and I are already really interested in this, and I'm sure Mark will be there to help us along the way.
Great to be with you guys. And Ashley, thanks so much. Good to see you.
Thank you. Oh, and this is recorded, everybody. So if you're interested in watching it again or sharing it with any of your employees, it will be on our YouTube site. Now I have to stop recording it.